What's that mean, 2 minutes? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to confirm that at 2 minutes past 9, there were 162 registered voters present in the auditorium, thus confirming our quorum requirement of 150 registered voters. Without hearing any objection, I'll waive the reading of the warrant and the constables will return, but for the record, the Abington Selectmen have called this special town meeting and issued their warrant. Warrants have been duly posted, notices have been delivered per the town bylaws, and I'd like to call this town meeting to order at 9:08 a.m. I'd ask you to please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone here to the special town meeting of October 14, 2023. My name is Sean Riley and I am the town moderator. First of all, I'd like to welcome you and thank you for all taking the time to attend today's meeting to exercise your right as a voter to take part in our town's legislative process. Whether this is your first time attending town meeting or if you're a regular attendee, we welcome you and we thank you for your participation. Please allow me to introduce a few people. Our town clerk, Leanne Adams, and her assistant today, Rebecca. Thank you. Seated in front of me are Mr. Scott Lambiasi, our town manager, Greg Corbo from KP Law, and also our bond counsel, Brenda McDonough. We also, seated in front of me in the front row, are members of our Abington Finance Committee. Finance Committee is comprised of Abington residents who volunteer to review and analyze each article, which is to be voted on at town meeting. Finance Committee Chairman Dan Eddy will be speaking to you at times throughout the meeting. And of course, our Board of Selectmen are seated on the floor in front of you, facing you in front of the stage. We ask that you abide by the following rules and guidelines during this town meeting in order to allow you the opportunity to ask questions, share your opinions, or simply listen to the debate. If you'd like to ask a question or share your point of view, please approach one of the two microphones in the aisles. The moderator will recognize you at the earliest available moment. At that time, please state your name and your address before you begin speaking so that our town clerk can properly record the minutes of this town meeting. Please make sure to keep all comments and questions relevant to the subject matter of the article being discussed and do not make any personal attacks or bring personalities into debating any issue. If I, as the moderator, believe that any speaker is straying from an issue, I will have to direct that speaker to limit his or her portion of the debate to the issue. We also ask that speakers limit their time at the microphone so that others will have an opportunity to speak and to be heard. I understand that many of you may have children at home or other people in your life who may need to contact you at some point during the meeting, but we ask you to please silence your cell phones and that you take any phone conversations out into the lobby in consideration of those who may be sitting near you. In case of emergency arises and we need to evacuate the building, please note the various emergency exits which may be available to you. There are exits located on the left and right at the middle of the auditorium. There are also exits at the back of the auditorium and here at the front of the auditorium. I've already appointed tellers who will be assigned to help us count at any time if we need a standing vote, and they are aware of their assigned sections. Please also understand that to debate or discuss an item at tonight's town meeting, the subject matter must be listed in the warrant in the form of an article. The Finance Committee and others will be presenting their motions to either approve an article as it originally was printed, or sometimes to propose new wording with updated information, or to oppose an article, which we call passing over an article. If you have any questions about procedure or how to do something, please feel free to ask me. We'll do our best to make sure that we all understand what we are voting on, and I will, before I actually ask a vote, to declare your votes. If there are not any questions for procedure, I'd like to get started right away with our first article. I hope everyone did pick up a copy of the warrant that was handed out by our ushers. Some people refer to this as the party packet. Hopefully everyone has one. They can follow along. So with that, we will move to Article 1. Article 1 is an article to see if the town will vote to establish a stabilization fund for our opioids settlement fund. The moderator will recognize the chairman of the Finance Committee, Mr. Dan Eddy, to make a motion on Article 1.
Thank you, Sean. The Finance Committee moves that the town vote to approve Article 1 relative to the creation and funding of a new opioid settlement stabilization fund as written in the warrant, and to transfer to said fund the sum of $55,915.29 from unappropriated estimated opioid settlement receipts from the FY24 General Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Is there anything to be heard or any questions on Article 1? If not, there's a question up here. If you could come down and approach the microphone. One of the drawbacks of sitting up top is you have to come down.
I know.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Kathy Jones,
You can move that. There you go.
Kathy Jones, 639 Randolph Street. And my question is, because I printed out the abatement forms from the warrant, so I have to know, I wanted to know how much the establishment fund will be for, and who's managing this fund, basically? And how much are they getting paid?
Moderator would like to recognize Town Manager Scott Lambiase.
Okay, so this fund is, these are monies that we received as a settlement against, the Attorney General's office actually levied against the manufacturers of these pharmaceuticals. So we have about $102,000 at this point, roughly. And at the FY23, we had received the $55,000 that we're looking to put into this. These monies can be used for things like opioid use disorder treatment. You could use to support people that are in recovery, used for connections of care, harm reduction. It's all spelled out in the settlement from the Attorney General's office. So we set up a committee. The Board of Selectmen put together a stabilization fund committee that's made up of, we have our veterans agent on it, we have someone from the senior center director is on it, our health agent is on it, there's a few other citizens that are on it also. And much like the CPA funds work is, on an annual basis, folks can come in and say, look, we have a project that falls into one of these categories, and we would like to use some funds from this. And at that time, we'll present something to town meeting on an annual basis, much like we do with a capital plan or with the CPA plan and stuff like that. So ultimately, it'll be town meeting that makes these final decisions.
But who writes this, all right, so I'm asking, who writes this annual report to the state? Like it says in
The accounting office.
the accounting office, so the accounting office is definitely going to be the ones to handle all the questions and all the
Yep.
all the things.
And
Okay.
town meeting will approve all expenditures from those funds in the future.
And so the accounting office takes on the
The responsibility,
ability.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on Article 1? If not, I'll be asking, this isn't the vote yet, I'll be asking all those in favor to say aye, and I'll wait for the response, and then I'll ask all those opposed to say no, and we'll see what the result is. So, all those in favor of approving the Finance Committee's motion to approve Article 1, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is unanimous. Articles 2, 3, and 4 all relate to the proposed amendment and restatement of a zoning bylaw and zoning map for the South Weymouth Naval Air Base property, which is now known as Union Point. As you may be aware, the air base property was owned by the federal government and is comprised of just over 1,400 acres of land, with approximately 47% of the land in Weymouth, 41% in Rockland, and 12% in Abington. After the air base closed in the mid-1990s, special legislation was passed to create what is now known as the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, or the SRA. The SRA is a statutorily created local governmental agency which controls land use decisions and development decisions within the Union Point property. Through our Board of Selectmen, the Southfield Redevelopment Authority has submitted Articles 2, 3, and 4 for your consideration and vote. Identical zoning amendments have already been approved by Weymouth, and Rockland will be reviewing these same amendments at their special town meeting on November 7th, I believe. Article 2 proposes a revised and updated set of zoning bylaws for the Union Point property. Article 3 proposes a revised and updated zoning map for the Union Point property, which reflects the changes contained in the proposed new zoning bylaws. And Article 4 proposes an update to our Abington zoning bylaws, which essentially recites and affirmatively confirms that any development within Abington's portion of the Union Point property will be subject to the superseding provisions of the Union Point zoning bylaws, which is in Article 2. The zoning amendments proposed by these three articles are all interrelated and dependent on each other, meaning that your approval of the zoning bylaw amendments would not be effective unless the zoning map amendment is also approved. And conversely, if the zoning bylaw amendments or the zoning map amendment is rejected, then the proposed zoning amendment package would not take effect. In other words, The proposed zoning amendments outlined in Articles 2, 3, and 4 are a package deal for the voters to approve or reject. After consulting with Town Council and in accordance with Section 152-9 of our town bylaws, the moderator has the authority to bring articles forward for consideration together. And thus, I'm going to allow discussion and questions about Articles 2, 3, and 4 as a single presentation and debate. I feel this would be much more efficient use of our time here together, and instead of having 3 separate motions and 3 separate debates and 3 separate votes, without objection, I'm going to ask for one motion from the Planning Board regarding these 3 articles, and then I will allow the articles to be considered together as part of one presentation and discussion, and I will then ask for one single vote whether to approve Articles 2, 3, and 4 or to reject Articles 2, 3, and 4. The wording of Articles 2, 3, and 4 appears in the printed warrant, copies of which were handed out to you when you arrived, and the articles also appear on the projection screen on the stage. After the motion is presented and without any objection, as moderator, I will be allowing some non-resident professional proponents of these articles to make a brief presentation at town meeting in order to summarize and describe the purposes of Articles 2, 3, and 4 and answer any questions. Unless there are any procedural questions, I'm now going to ask the Finance Committee and the Planning Board to make their required recommendations and motions so we can begin our review of Articles 2, 3, and 4 and then answer any questions that you may have. That being said, moderator recognizes the Finance Chairman, Dan Eddy.
Thank you, Sean. So the Finance Committee has discussed and support approval of these articles, but has deferred to the Planning Board for their recommendation.
Finance Committee defers to the Planning Board. It being a zoning amendment, the Planning Board typically makes the motion, so the moderator would like to recognize Assistant Town Planner Liz Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Got to give me one quick second here. So on September 18th, the Planning Board held its required public hearing to review the proposed zoning amendments contained in Articles 2, 3, and 4. After reviewing the proposed amendments, the Planning Board voted 4-0, we were missing one board member, to recommend that the town meeting approve Articles 2, 3, and 4 as presented in the warrant. The Planning Board noted that the redevelopment of the air base has been delayed and thwarted for 25 years, but the Southfield Redevelopment Authority's recent decision to retain New England Development and Brookfield Properties as the new master developer has generated a new sense of confidence that this property will be developed in a responsible manner with local input and with an eye towards preserving a significant amount of open space. The zoning amendments proposed in Articles 2, 3, and 4 provide needed updates to Union Point zoning bylaws and its zoning map, and the most significant revision is the creation of a new zoning district called the Mixed Use Development District, which encompasses the developable land in Weymouth, Rockland, and Abington. If the proposed new zoning map is approved, the air-based land situated in Abington will be comprised of 2 zoning districts, the Open Space District and the Mixed-Use Development District. The same 2 districts are proposed for the land in Rockland, and the remaining developable land in Weymouth will also be either Open Space District or the Mixed-Use Development District. The proposed zoning amendments will allow the airbase to be developed with a mix of commercial and residential properties based on market demands over the next 15 to 20 years. For any construction projects in Abington, the Abington Building Department will retain jurisdiction and will issue all building permits, collect all fees, and conduct all inspections. It should also be noted that all federal, state, and local wetlands regulations shall apply to any development in any portion of Union Point, because these proposed zoning amendments will have no effect on the requirement for any and all construction to abide by environmental regulations. New England Development and Brookfield Properties have proven track records with large projects, including the need to satisfy local, state, and federal permitting and regulations, the ability to seek and qualify for federal and state grants and bond programs, the financial capacity to invest in new water and sewer services for this property, and a proven investment in high-quality construction with a mix of uses which services the future residents of their properties. As examples of other successful projects as this master developer has undertaken, the Planning Board noted that their successful revitalization and redevelopment of the University Station mixed-use project in Westwood, adjacent to Route 128 commuter rail station, and also their impressive design and construction of the Pine Hills mixed-use project in Plymouth. In sum, given the history of prior failed attempts to develop the airbase property and given the past history of success for this new master developer, the Planning Board believes that the proposed zoning amendments offered in Articles 2, 3, and 4 are reasonably flexible without giving up local control, will provide a large buffer of open space around the perimeter of the airbase, and offers the best opportunity to encourage thoughtful and long-term investments in Union Point in the years to come. For all of these reasons, the Abington Planning Board moves that Articles 2, 3, and 4 be approved as presented in the warrant.
Thank you, Ms. Shea. The Planning Board makes a motion to approve Articles 2, 3, and 4 as presented in the warrant. Moderator, I'd like to recognize at this time the Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Mr. Alex Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Alex Haggerty, 515 Summer Street, Chairman of the Abington Board of Selectmen. I'll be brief. The Board of Selectmen on September 25th, 2023, voted unanimously recommending favorable action of Articles 2, 3, and 4. Amendment to zoning bylaw, approval of South Weymouth Naval Air Station zoning district map, and amendment to zoning bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. At this time, I'd like to recognize and invite Mr. John Tuig to approach the microphone and make a summary and presentation of this proposal being put forth to you in Articles 2, 3, and 4. Mr. Tuig.
Thank you, Moderator Riley. I want to thank the Board of Selectmen, the Planning Board, Finance, and most importantly, all of you for allowing us to come to your special town meeting today. My name is John Tuig. I'm with New England Development. I'm here with our partner, Brookfield Properties. We've been appointed as the new master developer. We will try to be as brief as we can, although it is a complex project. What is in front of you is fairly straightforward, namely a zoning request. But Moderator Riley has already told me it is a Saturday. Your programs have been played on local cable TV too many times. We have other things to do, so please be brief and get to the point. So with that, we tried to decide how best could we describe this project and what we're trying to do. And my father always told me, keep it simple, tell you a little bit about who we are, what we're trying to do, what's going on there now, what's the process we've gone through, and why should you vote for this? And that's what I'm going to try to do in about a half a dozen slides before I get the hook from Mr. Riley, who I know is standing right behind me. So with that said, a little bit, if we go to the next slide, a little bit about who we are. New England Development has been around about 40 plus years. It was founded by our chairman, Steve Karp. It's still our founder. We were originally regional shopping mall developers. We own, manage, and develop properties, hold them for an extraordinary period of time. Most of the projects we've worked on, some we've owned as many as 40, 45 years. I'm going to highlight probably two projects. We've done about 50 million square feet. We have about 4 million square feet in development. We're based in Boston. We are all local folk. I grew up in Brockton. This is an area that we've all known and developed in. There was mentioned by Liz Shea, a project that we've done in Westwood. If you know, it's on the top left there. It's where Amtrak is. We did a Wegmans there. We did a Target. We also have Citizens Bank regional headquarters there. We have Brigham and Women. We're about to put Dana-Farber's new cancer center there. We have residential development there. The reason we often highlight that project as it relates to the base is it was a failed project. My colleague who's in the back, Paulson Cotter, and I worked on it for 10 years. It had been taken over by the bank. It had been foreclosed. It had failed 2 or 3 times, and we spent the last 10 years redoing it into a 2 million square foot mixed-use project. It has a lot of, believe it or not, similarities to our experience in the base. Liz Shea also mentioned Pine Hills. It's a local project. People know it down in Plymouth, 3,000 acres. We built 2,500 homes there with many development opportunities that have gone on there. We think it's a beautiful development that people like to live in. Another project that we have done is Cambridge side. If you know Cambridge at all, it was originally a mall. I started working on it in 1987. I was but a child when I started on that, working with Steve to redevelop that into a regional mall. If you go there today, actually go there by the end of the month, where the old Macy's used to be is going to be a 400,000 square foot pharmaceuticals building. We're building a residential building there, a lot of retail, a lot of restaurants, rebuilding the canal space that is there. All of that to sort of let you explain a little bit about who we are, what we do. We do develop from Maine to Florida, but we're based here in Boston, and these are the kinds of projects that we do. Brookfield, who is our joint venture partner, is not known around here as much. They are probably, depending on the day, the first or second largest global real estate company in the world with $250 billion worth of assets. We're their joint venture partner. We're very excited to have them. They have done many planned communities, primarily like us, commercial developers, but have done over 50 different communities all across the state and actually in other countries. So that's a little bit about what we do. What do you take from that message? This is what we work on. We work with the state agencies. We work with the local agencies. We've been doing it a long time. We've been doing it pretty successfully. just to kind of give you a sense. That has not always been true in the people who have tried to develop this base. What's there now? You can see by what's up on the screen, Abington is about 12% of the base. The whole base is about 1,400 acres. Obviously, you have the T-station that's here in Weymouth. You folks all know where this is. Route 18, go out through the Parkway, you're going to come out to 228 and 3. Weymouth is here, Rockland, and Abington. What's there? What's there? These are photos from last week. What's there are old runways, old taxiways, a lot of debris and sort of different things, foundations for one of, I think it was hangar number 2 that was there. Unfortunately, the base has been closed since the 1990s and nothing has happened in Abington. There has been some development, you can see in the distance there in Weymouth, but nothing has happened in Abington. That's actually the condition that you have. So as you look at the next slide and think about what we'd like to do, and I'm just going to kind of focus on it more from a land planning standpoint. You look at the 1,400 acres, a lot of traditional open space in the north, a lot of traditional open space and habitat and turtles and different things in the south. The development that's been built up here in Weymouth, the parkway that comes through. What is one of our ideas? We call it, I know it doesn't sound very fancy, but sort of runways to greenways, the idea of how do you connect the open space to create a place that people want to live, that people want to locate their businesses in, that people want to recreate in. So literally taking some of these runways that are some of them 3,000 feet long, 200 feet wide, turning them into green areas. And the biggest thing that you see when you go to the base is there is no there. There's no town center. There's no place to get a cup of coffee. There's no place to go to a dry cleaners. One of the things that we have promised, and to the 2,000 people who live there now, is one of the first things that we will do off of the Parkway is to build a town center, a retail town center. That is sort of where we started in our home base, but that's what we're thinking about. How do you create a place that could also include development in Abington for the first time? And that's why we're sort of moving forward with the zoning. So what have we been doing? A little bit about process. We had to go through and your moderator mentioned the Southfield Redevelopment Authority. They're the folks who sort of, under legislation, are charged with actually controlling the base. We worked with them to create new zoning. That's what's before you today in a new zoning map. We worked with them. We got a unanimous approval from them in March. We then went to Weymouth. Weymouth is the largest property that is there. There's over 400 developable acres. We went to Weymouth. We did get unanimous approval from the planning board and the city council for Weymouth. Now we moved to Abington. We're asking today for you to support the same zoning that was approved in Weymouth. In November, we will move to Rockland. And I would want to say to you, and so you understand, this is sort of the first step in a process, that we have local zoning that we can understand and that we can build a project in. We have to go through a whole state process and to get state approvals, because the last developer, virtually all the permits are in default and have to be done. And we have to figure out the infrastructure, which I'll talk about in a minute. But just so you know what we've been doing, obviously meeting with police, fire, school, to understand in Abington, what does it mean to bring a project forward? What are the costs going to be? And that all culminated. We started that, earlier in the year, but certainly strong efforts throughout the summer in your planning board approval, your board of selectmen approval, and the finance committee approval. And we're very pleased and proud that they supported and provided them the fiscal reports and the zoning text. And they were very robust discussions as we move forward. Okay, that all said, the articles, this has already been covered. We're asking for a zoning map approval, we're asking for a zoning text approval, and the fourth article talks about that when you want to develop at the base, where do you look? You actually look to this zoning, you don't look to the traditional Abington zoning. That's where the zoning is located. So that's actually what's before you. Okay, that's what we're asking for, but why should you vote for this? I mean, it's a very logical and appropriate question. So let's talk about that a little bit. A few things. The base has not had someone to manage it and run it. SRA's done a great job to sort of do it with very limited resources. But everything from maintenance, from the infrastructure, some of that infrastructure that's out there, stormwater and the like, was built in 1940 and 1941. The base, and as you drive around it, you really do see and how it is struggling because no one is there to curate it, to maintain it, to develop it. So that's one of the big advantages, because we have a significant security issue out there. Because you have wide open spaces, people drive in on the weekends, no permits, no approvals, things happen there. It is not good to have that kind of acreage, including in Abington and in the other two communities, where there's no one sort of protecting it. So that's sort of one issue about why, no matter what, you want to see that base developed. Second thing is open space. Open space is a big issue today in every community. We worked with your open space committee. We're going to have over 800 acres of the 1,400 acres of the base are going to be either open space or restricted land to protect the habitat that's out there. We have the second largest eastern box turtle habitat, actually in Massachusetts, that is there. We have bird habitat, other things, but it does leave the opportunity to develop down here in Abington. A lot of debris, a lot of trash out there, all has to be dealt with. One of the other reasons to develop it. Financially, why would you want to see this happen? We hired a firm called RKG. They're a national firm that does mostly for municipalities and states, and sort of figured out in Abington, go meet with police, go meet with fire, go meet with the schools, look at the Abington tax rate, look at how they assess properties in Abington. What if we were to build heavy commercial there, a lot of commercial buildings, not too many residential? What if we were to build heavy residential there, not as many commercial? What would that mean for the residents of Abington after you figured out the gross amount and then subtract from that all the costs? Because anybody who moves into a community has costs. Has costs to run today's meeting. Everybody has costs. So we figured those costs out, and we determined for the town of Abington, when the project would be built out, $4 to $5 million in what they call net new tax revenues. That means after paying all of those costs. So a significant financial opportunity. One of the big things, though, and we've said this at every meeting we've had, we need to fix the infrastructure out here. Abington doesn't have water, for example. Abington needs water. All the communities in the South Shore need water. We're doing two things. We're working with the MWRA. There's water. They have 100 million gallons a day extra water that sits up in the Blue Hills. Working with them on how to bring that down, working with the SRA. And then there's also water that comes from a desalination plant that's controlled by the city of Brockton, which has a 36-inch pipe on Route 18 at Peaceful Meadows. And the idea that that water could be brought up to serve Abington and the base. Those are two things that we're looking at. I said Peaceful Meadows, that's where it is. I guess I'm going to call it Hornster now, which I'm really upset about, but I'm not going to go there. But yeah, if they don't fix the coffee extra thick frap. But anyway, these are things that we've been spending the time on. We have to solve, and the reason this base has failed so many times is everybody always looks at, well, if I get a little bit more water, I get a little bit more sewer, fix an intersection, I can build a building, I'll make a little money. We are not looking at it that way. If we can't solve for the entire development of the base, all the water problems, all the sewer problems, all the transportation, get a certificate from the state that we know that we can build this out in phases, we will not do this project. Because we have to know, because of what it costs. The MWRA pipe, just to give you an idea, is an $80 million pipe to take it from the Blue Hills down here. The one coming from the south, coming up Route 18, about half that cost, but still very significant cost. We have to solve water, sewer, and transportation to make this base work, to be able to develop in Abington, to move it forward. But that's the way we're looking at it. Brookfield and New England Development, what do we specialize in? Large scale, complex, multi-permitting transactions. That's what we do. And we're really kind of good at it. And we're here, and we think we can move this forward, fix the infrastructure if everyone supports us, and then go forward. Zoning is a first step. We have to send the message to the state that we're able to redo the zoning. We'll work through what they call the MEPA process and the other thing and move the project forward. So we would ask for your support when it comes time to vote on the articles. We're obviously here to answer any questions. And again, thank you for the time to come to your special town meeting so we could talk about the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tuig. Want to allow him the chance to kind of put some facts out there, to, as a friend of mine says, to set the table so we all have a working knowledge of where we start. This being a zoning article, in fact, all of the articles in this morning's warrant require a 2/3 vote. Is there anything to be heard, any questions on Articles 2, 3, or 4? Sir. If you want to approach that microphone, if you'd like to approach that microphone. Please state your name and address.
Richard Negrelli, 340 Diane Circle. If this passes, none of the local boards in this town can monitor permits and everything, like the zoning board, the planning board, conservation. They have no input at all. Is that correct?
Who would like to? Moderator recognizes Assistant Town Planner Liz Shea.
The SRA is the permitting authority for
Basically, the town
everything
of
down there.
Abington
There will be a
Hold on,
zoning
one at a
board.
time.
Give me a second. There will be a zoning board comprised of a member from each community down there that will hear appeals of the land use administrator decisions. But the Southfield Redevelopment Authority is the permit granting authority for all development. So not only just for Abington, but Rockland and Weymouth as well. Anybody who gets through their permitting process and wants to build something will have to go to our building department to pull a permit.
Yeah, I understand the building permit, basically that's state, but
This is the way it has been
I understand.
for years and years and
but
years.
the
This is
other-
not really a change to that. This
I understand.
Hold on, hold on.
construct has, this is how it's been.
Ladies and gents, hold on, we're going one at a time.
But still, you take
Hold on,
away-
hold on.
Are you done?
No, Mr. Negrelli, hold on. Ms. Shea, finish your response, and then I'll let Mr. Negrelli respond.
Okay. That, I was just explaining that this process has been in place since the zoning changed at the air base many years ago. So this is not something new coming up today, it's something that has existed.
Thank you. Mr. Negrelli.
So it's true that our boards in this town will have no input. One person may, but the town boards have no input.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Sir, state your name and address.
Richard Carter, 42 Crabtree Lane. My concern is schools. First, that net gain to the town, when they figure that out, did they figure in the cost of providing education for the kids, where they're going to be? And I'm assuming that if they're in Abington, they have to go to the Abington schools. I suppose that's a question. Is that true?
I'm just going to defer that to
Mr.
Mr.
Toohey.
Toohey.
Thank you, Mr. Carter.
Thank you.
When we develop the fiscal study, you start with figuring out, obviously, the revenue side, but we spend a lot of time on the cost side, meeting with the police, call volume, meeting with fire, call volume, what's in their budget, what incrementally is going to change. School department, what do they spend on fixed and variable costs per student basis? How many students do we think might be added? If you had this many, if it's all commercial development, it would be very little. If it was more residential, you have more. Figure out cost per student. The net numbers that we showed on the screen and are in the RKG report, which your finance committee reviewed, all accounted for the actual costs for school children to come. The net number, what we're showing you, is after you take out police, fire, school, general services, cost of the library, cost of coming to a meeting like this, all those costs have been deducted because it is not appropriate for us to say to you, this is a net benefit, unless we can show to you that we have taken out all of the costs that it's going to be for someone to either live in the community or have a business in the community. We have done that. We've actually reviewed it with the school department. RKG, who did that work for us, primarily does work for states and municipalities. They don't often work for private developers. We did ask them to do an independent review. And the other reason why, and I think this gave some comfort to the Finance Committee, very unusually, when you have a project, we have Weymouth as an example. Now, Abington is not Weymouth. Weymouth is not Abington. That's not what I mean. But there are 1,274 homes there. There are school children there. There's police and fire calls. We have years of experience to be able to figure out and to just sort of take that and say, if the experience was similar, what would it look like? But we didn't do it that way. We did it as what are the costs in each one of the communities and what is the cost in Abington by department. And that's how we computed it. But we were also able to cross-check it because in Weymouth, what they have concluded, after paying for bond costs and everything else with the amount of residences and some business that they have there, they net every year over $3 million a year. So it gave us great comfort to know that even if we used higher costs for Abington on a per-call basis because of the size of the department, and we adjusted all those things, that our numbers were coming out in a very consistent way. We do fiscal community studies all the time. You saw our University Station project. People were very concerned. Westwood has arguably one of the best school systems in the Commonwealth, they would tell you, and I think it's right. And they were very concerned about that. So we did all of our estimates the same way. RKG actually worked for the town of Westwood, not for us. And they concluded that on a net basis, that community was going to enjoy about $7 million a year in net revenues. Today, 10 years later, with the project built, we aren't finished yet, but getting close, They have $11.5 million a year. Because our theory and our approach has always been, we want to underpromise and overdeliver. I want you to say, when that base is built, I want you to come back and say, gee, you said X, it's really X plus Y, we appreciate that. That's our approach. Be conservative in our numbers, include all the costs, come up with a net basis. A long-winded answer, but it's a really important question because it's really one of the things that support why you should vote for this.
Thank you, Mr. Tuig. And let's make that your last long-winded answer. All right? You good?
Oh, no, that was informative. Thank you very much.
Any follow-up?
Yes, now I just lost, I'm having a senior moment. I just
That's
lost my
okay.
train of thought.
If you want to come back, you can come back.
Boy, I really lost it. Is anyone else? Wait, no.
Yes.
You go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please.
Kelly Marr, 125 North Ave. So it's not really a question, it's more like I support with the amending of the bylaws and the zoning bylaws. I think the $4 million after the project is finished will definitely benefit our town. It'll make it go a lot further and bringing in more residents.
Speak up, please. Speak right into that microphone. You're doing great.
Now I'm on the spot. Now it's so I agree with amending the bylaws and bringing more people to our community, to our town. After the project is finished, we're going to do nothing but profit from it. Bringing more people into our town is going to continue to profit for us as well. I mean, yeah.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Name and address.
Cindy Whiting, 100 Colonel Hunt Drive. And I'm not saying I'm for or against. After listening to Mr. Tuig, I feel a little more comfortable, but I have a couple of questions for him, if that's okay.
Let's hear what they are.
Okay, my first one is, you mentioned something about the water and talked about Aquaria, and I think when Brockton bought the Aquaria plant, it was somewhat outdated. I'm assuming it's been brought up to speed now so that it's going to be able to provide the water if that's the way that you go. I had a concern about the surge. I think I heard that Abington may go to Brockton where it is currently. We do have capacity left because we had gotten more when we were, I think we were on a moratorium. With all the building that has gone on in the town of Abington, and if that Summer Street project, I haven't heard much about that lately, does go forward, is that going to give enough capacity for the Abington piece to go to Brockton? I was at Pine Hills the other day for work. They do have a lovely little town center there with stores and all this commercial build-out and stuff that they've done. But it's in a different location than this piece is in the Abington, Rockland, Weymouth area, where you have the New Hanover Mall, the Derby stores, all of the new building with office spaces going up and down through Weymouth with restaurants and stuff. Just kind of a thought as to what might, or what you're focusing on to put stores off of the main area now. Plymouth, they're kind of isolated down there, so they do visit these stores and the commercial properties. But this area is already well built up, so, just how comfortable are we with that? And I have two more, I promise, and this is more for probably maybe town council. There were some kind of warnings that were put out with the documentation that if this does not go forward, Abington, Rockland, and Weymouth could possibly be on the hook for paying some defaulted bonds. And if we don't own the land, and we didn't sign on the note, I'd just like to know how we could be on the hook for a piece of that. And if this goes forward, the Navy is going to promise cleanup. And if this doesn't go forward, Abington could be on the hook by the Navy to help with cleanup. I don't know how that works again because it's not land that we own. It says it's under our jurisdiction. We don't own it. So then how do we then become responsible? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Whiting. Mr. Tuig, in 30 seconds or less, could you answer? No. So we had questions about water, sewer, commercial viability, and then we'll talk about what happens if we don't approve this.
Okay, water plant, Aquaria, can go up to 5 million gallons a day. There's nothing wrong with that plant. We've had it fully inspected. It's in great shape, and so that's really not an issue. Sewage, yes, there is excess opportunity for sewage, but we're looking at sewage in a global way for all three communities, so we are trying to find out the answer for that. Pine Hills is a very different location. There's a lot more retail and commercial space up here. So what we're going to build, what our first is about 80 to 100,000 square feet of what we call community retail, which will be more a place for people to get food, dry clean, whatever, have a bank, because there is no there. Opportunities to have farmers market, things like that. That's really the commercial opportunity. I don't know if you want to speak to the last two.
Yeah, if you want to speak, and then or Mr. Donovan?
I think Mr. Donovan wanted to.
Moderator recognizes Selectman Kevin Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Kevin Donovan, 78 Adams Street. Just by virtue of a little bit of history on the project, I've been involved in this since actually 1998, when then I was a selectman. I was only 12 at the time. But in once upon a time, I also was the Chief Executive Officer of the South Shore Redevelopment Authority, and I spent 5.5 years there as the CEO. When I came on board, I was presented the Naval Air Station, all 1,440 acres of it, with nothing, no development, nothing. It was barren land and vacant buildings. My charge was to A, form a government, and B, to negotiate with the United States Navy as to the transfer and cleanup of the remaining properties. I spent a lot of time negotiating with the Navy Department in Philadelphia and at the Pentagon to get the remaining land transferred. Currently, as we sit here today, there's only 44 acres left. Actually, it's in Weymouth that needs to be transferred. But one of the things I did in this recent iteration, as we were discussing whether we should rezone it or not, is I reached out to a gentleman whom I had been in contact with and negotiated with in the Navy, Greg Preston, who's now the director of the BRAC Commission, which is the Base Realignment Enclosure Commission. And I asked him the question in terms of cleanup because I think it was brought up here, and I just want to read very briefly his response to me. However, to be very clear, Navy also has built-in protection such that if we are not happy with the performance of the cleanup effort, we can and will cancel the agreement and hire a new contractor to manage the effort. On the positive side, the developer agrees with us and is properly incentivized to perform the task at hand in an effective and efficient manner. Bottom line is that I think we're in a good place moving forward through the redevelopment phase build-out of the project. Frankly, better than most. I am touting Weymouth's setup as a model for other bases to consider as they move forward with their redevelopment. Now, this particular office, his jurisdiction goes from Maine down to Puerto Rico into about the middle of the United States. So he encompasses a lot of closed military installations. The question came, I believe, from Mrs. Whiting in terms of what does it mean in terms of cleanup? Well, Navy has been able to work out a deal with the developer that the developer will do the cleanup on the property, which is essential for the redevelopment of the Naval Air Station. The whole idea when the base was closed in 1996, and the reason the Navy and Congress set up this Base Alignment Commission was that it would go to the communities on the basis of economic development. That was the primary reason the land was to be transferred to the communities for their control for economic development. Since 1998, when the original legislation was established, the board overseeing, that was who I worked for, we were a governmental agency within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Abington has a representative on that board. In answer to Mr. Negrelli's question, yes, since 1998, all permitting, planning, zoning, conservation has been done for the last 25 years by the board of directors that encompasses the Naval Air Station. The legislation changed in 2014 and they added a few more people on the board. The bottom line is this. When I was there, we negotiated with, at the time, the Patrick administration to give us money through what they called the IQ program to build the East-West Parkway, which is the Delahunt Parkway that transverses the base. Currently, the deal with that was that any new development at the base, the taxes that were realized from that would go to pay the bonds that the state had floated. That was roughly a $24 million bond. Currently, that is in default by $6.8 million. In answer to whether or not the towns would be on the hook for that or not, essentially, if the developer goes away, and in my opinion, for the last 25 years, this is the most reputable firm we could have ever had. Their portfolio is outstanding. They have the capital behind them to properly develop the project as it was envisioned. If they go away, in my opinion, that's it. This has gone on for too long, and my sense would be that the Commonwealth would turn around and say, okay, towns, it's yours. It's an open question, quite honestly, Cindy, as to what would happen. Certainly an argument could be made, well, the Commonwealth is going to step forward and say, we've got $24 million of bonds hanging out there. It's not within our bonding cap. Towns, we got to work something out here. The second point is Navy's going to come up and say, well, wait a minute, we worked a deal with the developer to clean up the property. Who's going to pay for that? And, you know, I would have a modest suggestion that I think they would be coming back to look to us. Is it a foregone conclusion? No. Is it possible? Yes. The remaining thing is I know there was a question as regards to the school children. When I was there, I argued quite a bit with the Weymouth Town Council and the Weymouth Public Schools as to the amount of school children. They wanted us to pay to build a brand new school on the base. I said no. History dictated that the children were not going to come forward as they had anticipated. I was right. In 2012, we only had 12 students out of the population that was on the base. Today, 11 years later, the population of students going to Weymouth Public Schools is 67. So it's just the product that they had built did not entice the families, and lifestyles have changed, and the children did not come forward that everybody had anticipated that they would, you know, from that standpoint. So I think the bottom line is this, in my opinion. We've taken 25 years to look at this entire project. We've had starts, failures, and now we have a plan in place, a developer that can give us the economic development that we originally envisioned in 1998. I think from an environmental standpoint, they clearly, if we were to leave it and nothing happened, on the Abington side, we've got at the end of that runway, it's full of rebar, concrete, you name it, it's out there. Somebody's going to have to clean that up. And in order to restore it to its natural habitat, which is what the goal is, the plan that has been put forward addresses that and addresses the fact that, you know, we're going to have green space all around it. So at the end of the day, Mr. Moderator, when the question comes on the motion as offered by Mrs. Shea, I would hope that for the environmental and the economic benefit for the citizens of Abington, that I would ask that you please consider this and vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. Yes, ma'am, you've been waiting patiently for name and address.
Martha. Move this out of the way. Okay. Martha Kraft, 175 Damon Road, Abington. I have 4 questions. I hope I'm not going to be limited to 30 seconds. My first question is, at the time of the closure of the base, did the entire area go in under the auspices of the land bank? Is that who's currently the main ruler? I don't know how.
Do you want to ask your 4 questions, or do you want to get answers as you go?
I'll take each one as I go.
Okay, we'll try to do it very quickly. Mr. Donovan.
I mean, that's kind of a yes or no.
Yeah, no. The land in question at the time of the closure was put under the care, custody, and control of the South Shore Tri-Town Development Corporation, which was a municipal entity. So it did not go to the land bank. It was under our control, but remember, Navy still had control quite a bit of the property at that time.
Okay, so it's now under the control of the 3 towns.
It's under the jurisdictional control, which what it means is that we don't own the property, that it's jurisdictionally is now within the confines of the corporate boundaries of the towns, yes.
So is there an agreement that at the end of a particular period of time, that agreement ends and something else could change in terms of what the base becomes?
Under the current legislation, when the last bonds are paid off, there is a provision in the legislation that sunsets the corporation. And then the land, the jurisdiction of the land then reverts to the communities. Legislation is always subject to change, but currently, as we sit here today, the answer to that question is yes.
Okay, so right now, it couldn't at some time in the future become a separate town?
No, not currently, the way it's currently structured, correct.
Okay, but that could change.
The legislature does a lot of things.
Okay, all right, that's my first question. Second question is, acreage-wise, with this, if this amendment goes through, how many acres will be residential/business, because I assume you're doing both of them, and how much of it will be conservation? As opposed to now, how much is, well, I guess right now it's just
Thank you. I'd like
mess.
to recognize Mr. Tuig, if you could answer that as best as possible. Mr. Donovan, don't go far.
Our proposal is about 179, call it 180 acres. About 80 acres we're proposing to be an open space, about 100 acres to be available for development for commercial residential purposes.
Thank you. The tax benefits, when would they be realized? I mean, I assume it's not going to all get built up in 1 year. So for the town of Abington. And, all right,
Those numbers that were shown were at full build-out.
and how many years is that down the road?
Ooh, who has the crystal ball? Mr. Tuig can offer whatever answer you'd like.
In our experience, project this size, we have significant water and sewer problems have to be solved first. We've got 12 to 15 years to build out. That's what's in our program.
Did you say 50?
12 to 15 years.
50?
No, 12 to 15 years.
1-5.
1, 2,
Thank you,
2,
thank
1,
you.
5. Right.
Sorry,
That is an estimate.
I have hearing aids.
Final question?
The next question, in the housing area, how many units of housing would be, are planned for? How many would be single occupant housing, family occupant, and senior housing?
That, we're getting a little bit off track. We don't know. We're just changing the zoning bylaw. Anything that would have to be proposed would have to go through the procedure of approval or denial.
Would that come to town meeting?
No, that will go to the
Well, then I think we
SRA.
need to know how much of it, or is it going to be senior housing planned? Is it going to be, I mean, I'm a senior. Is this something I can go into?
Mr. Tuig, if you want to try to answer that.
How many family, because family units in particular are very important, because when you have family units, it adds to your tax base. Because what you get from taxes for any particular unit, and doesn't matter if it's here or anywhere else, doesn't pay for the education of a child. Now you start adding 2, 3, 4, or 5 kids, and you're really in trouble tax-wise.
Just very quickly, we've had a lot of interest in senior housing for this site. Faring Way, which is in Weymouth, is very successful. The type of housing that we anticipate is really a mix of housing and residences for people that will be everything from single-family homes to townhomes to multifamily housing as a potential throughout the base. I'm not necessarily saying in Abington. I'd have to say to you, and I've said this publicly, how we live today and the type of housing that we have is very different than it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. You find family units are very different. Family sizes are extraordinarily different. I can't tell you what we would end up. It will be certainly market-driven. We think there'll probably be less traditional single-family homes in this development than would have been, say, 10 years ago.
Ms. Kraft.
And you can probably answer this as well. Will there be any affordable housing and subsidized housing? Because that is two different things.
It's two different things. The legislation actually requires that the base have 10% affordable housing, which is broken into two categories, traditional affordable housing and workforce housing. And that's in the legislation. And the base currently has 12%.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any other questions right now.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Name and address, please. Ms. Franey.
Mary Jo Franey, 12 Platt Street, Abington. I just have a couple, not much on. My concern, right, I'm concerned, I live in North Abington, which is the oldest section of the town. We are tied into the water with Rockland. We can't drink, we can't cook in it. The base is right, years ago, the runway was up my street. My concern is the soil there. There's a lot of cancer in our area. So it's not going to affect me with the water, but it will when the soil starts being turned over. That's my one question. My second question is, no one's mentioned police and fire. Our town here in Abington is getting big. It's growing. My concern is, how are they, if there's a fire, a major accident, how are we going to work that with our police and fire if there's something going on at the base? That's my other concern.
Who would like to take a shot at that? A question about cleanup and a question about fire police response or demand. Mr. Tuig?
Selectman Donovan mentioned it. We've spent a lot of time working with the Navy about the issue of cleanup. They're owed a lot of money. This was a naval air base. They've agreed that the monies that they're owed, and we've already started it, to allow us to use those monies to build a dewatering plant to treat, and people heard PFAS, which you hear a lot about in the newspaper, these forever chemicals, that's on the base, because where did most of those chemicals originate? They're often used when you were fighting fires or dealing with fuel spills. What was it? Naval Air Base. So it's PFAS out on the base. The Navy has been and continues to be responsible for the cleanup, but they're going to allow us to actually build a dewatering plant on the base, utilizing the money that's supposed to be sent down to Washington to actually use here, so that we can treat the groundwater and and be able to dewater it and to actually bring and treat and take the PFAS out. So that was the deal that we made with the Navy on cleanup. It's the one that Mr. Donovan referred to. On police and fire, all I can say to you is more revenue is better to deal with police and fire. When we did and had RKG do the study, we did an extensive study to determine call volume, costs, budgets, so that the numbers we presented you would be net numbers after taking those costs into account.
Thank you, Mr. Tuig. Chief Glynn, would like to add something? Moderator recognizes Fire Chief Jack Glynn.
Good morning. To address Mrs. Franny, I believe, we spoke in depth with, I believe it's RKG. They collected a lot of data over our call volume over the last 5 or 6 years, any anticipated costs going forward, any concerns we'd have going forward with it. We're confident that we'll be able to get through anything we need to get through with this project going forward. Right now, as it stands, it's a safety problem. It's been a safety problem for us for a long time. It's been dumping. We have the towers over there that seem to be, it seems like every month they're re-welding steel plates on there to keep the kids out of there. We've had buildings burned down there. We have, fires of debris being dumped in there. We're confident with the suggestions we had going forward with this. Bear in mind, as I believe Mr. Toohey said, this is a 12 to 15 year estimate on the project going forward. We work well with our mutual aid companies, so we're confident going forward with this. We fully support this.
Thank you, Chief Glynn. Yes, ma'am, please state your name and address.
Do you want to say something? No. Jean Mattios is 32 Nile Street. With the Abington land on the Naval Air Station, how many acres are being dedicated to development and how many are being dedicated to conservation?
I believe it was 100 for development and 80 will be open space
Okay, and do we know if in fact we've received or there has been received a conservation and management permit from the NHES?
Mr. Tuig, welcome to Abington.
There is a conservation management plan permit that exists today. It covers virtually all of the land in Abington.
Do you have the permit?
Permit has been in existence and exists today from 2009.
Okay.
It's still the valid permit. We have met with and done site walks with Natural Heritage. They are very upset about the condition of the property. They're upset about the debris piles, that none of the work that was supposed to have been done was done. We've been meeting with them and have a proposal with them now to actually create a fund to be able to mitigate, to remove the debris piles. They cannot issue us a new permit because that's something that we have to do until we go through local. Then we do what they call the MEPA process on the state. When the MEPA Secretary of Certificate of Environmental Affairs issues a certificate, then Natural Heritage could issue a new permit. But the governing permit right now is the existing 2009 permit.
Thank you.
Also on Mass Mapper, the entire Abington portion on the Naval Air Station is listed as priority habitat, 937 by NHES. So I'm kind of curious as to what correspondence has been communicated between you, the developer, and NHES, and is that available to the local conservation? I mean, I know local conservation will not have any input on this plan, but there are several major areas on the Abington property that are concerning. There's 2 certified vernal pools, there's a perennial stream, there's FEMA floodplain along that stream, there's wooded marshes. I mean, these are things, I don't know how you're going to develop them if approved as mud district. So, I mean,
It would not be in the mud district, it would be this zoning bylaw.
Okay, the zoning bylaw, but I mean, I'm looking at the map that was handed out.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, the multiple use, I thought, sorry, my bad.
So, I mean,
yes.
am I wrong?
No, you are correct.
So there's a stream that's going right through the mud district, which is what, I'm kind of trying to figure out where the development's going to occur, because there is a stream through there, and they're going to culvert it. I think at the planning meeting, Mr. Tuig indicated they weren't culverting anything and that it had been delineated, all the wetlands, but yet when I spoke with, I sent an email to our representative for the SRA, and he forwarded on to another gentleman who said the delineation has not been completed. So I just want to know, has there been any updates on that as far as the Abington property goes?
All right, Mr. Tuig, if you could answer that, I'm going to try to keep moving things along. Thank you, Mrs. Matiosis.
Thank you.
There's an existing delineation. A state grant came to the SRA so that they could update that delineation. That's still in process.
Okay, because the last delineation was done in 2019.
If you would let me finish.
Thank you.
That when that delineation is updated, we don't expect that there are going to be material changes to that delineation. When we develop the open space, we use the existing delineation to determine that.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Charlie Collins, 502 Adams Street. I just want to know what the plans are for the build-out of the water system. This project doesn't go forward until you get water. That's
correct.
Been the biggest problem for this whole program since 1997. I was at some of the early meetings. I drilled over there for 21 years. You know, the water in the aquifer underneath the base is polluted. Can't possibly be purified.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
What's the plans and the cost of bringing the water in from the MWRA or this other pipeline down at Peaceful Meadows?
Thank you, Mr. Collins. In the interest of time, I think it was mentioned earlier, it was about an $80 million project to bring the MWRA pipe from Braintree, or the alternative was $40 million to bring it up from Peaceful Meadows, right?
What's the timeline? What's the build-out timeline?
They can't get started until they get the water, so whether that's 3 years or 13 years, that's going to be their issue. I don't mean to speak for you, but thank you, Mr. Collins. Yes, sir.
My name's Dan Brillman. I live at 222 Linwood Street, one half of e-awakening.com, a public service website working to preserve and protect our nature. And I had asked to make a presentation to show the other side of what's at stake here, but I did not get that permission. And basically, I would have shown everybody the beautiful meadow that we're talking about that's in the middle of this multi-use development district. It's an absolutely gorgeous meadow with trails around it, and people, families walk their dogs. It's a great place. It's also a priority habitat with endangered species. Now, we received a mailing from New England Development, and the mailing says zoning approval will allow the base redevelopment to advance to further local and state approvals, but it doesn't say what the approvals are. And we really don't know what we're voting for here. We have not seen the plan of what they plan to build or develop, and The mailing also says that Abington's projected new annual revenues of $4.2 million to $5.4 million. Well, $5 million for 16,000 people is about $312.50 a person. And, you know, we really don't know what the expenses are going to be. We have to trust the developer. And if we vote for the zoning, then we've just given it away. We've given it away. The mailing also says that more than 500 acres are protected by conservation restrictions. But these are not conservation restrictions. These are grant restrictions. And grant restrictions can be altered by the Southfield Redevelopment Authority, the developer, and Natural Heritage. So we're asking voters to vote down Articles 2, 3, and 4 because we don't know what they're going to develop in there. This is a beautiful priority habitat. It's conservation land. There's endangered species in there. And New England Development needs to acquire a conservation and management permit according to some sources. So the question is, who do we trust here? And, you know, I'm not against development. I think we really need to clean that place up. But I want to preserve and protect nature. Somebody has to speak up for the wildlife there, the endangered species. This beautiful, irreplaceable meadow that I wasn't able to show you because I wasn't able to.
Thank you, Mr. Breelman. Yes, sir. Please state your name and address.
Thomas Bates, 295 Linwood Street. My question is, with all the development, what is going to be the infrastructure as far as the traffic getting out? Is it all going to go on to Route 58? Will 58 have to be widened? Is that going to be more expenses to the town?
Mr. Tuig, could you address traffic concerns?
We have an extensive traffic study that we have put in to originally the SRA, but also here in Abington by Vanessa and Associates. We've identified 72 different intersections to study, which is part of the state certificate. We've identified 30 intersections that have to be either widened, signal timing, rebuilt, lengthened in order to do that. Our primary focus is keeping the access to the points on 18 and then out to 228 and 3. That's what we're focusing on. But there will be extensive transportation improvements after we're done with local zoning. Our next step is in the state process, and actually we have a meeting next Wednesday with MassDOT, sitting with them and working with them on the intersections and presenting to them the various impacts that we see from the project.
Sir, can I ask, did you ask specifically about Route 58 or did you mean Route 18?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Did you want to ask specifically about Route 58, Adams Street, or did you mean to say Route 18?
My question was with the infrastructure, with all the building, how is it going to be accessed onto the Abington town roads? Through Route 58, or will roads have to be built to access it?
Thank you. Mr. Tuig, brief.
Our focus is going to be Route 18.
The existing entrance of Route 18.
To Route 18?
Yes.
How are they going to get to Route 18? You have to go through the base.
That's right.
Correct.
Yes, there's no, I don't want to put words in the mouth, but in the interest of time, there's no proposal to create a connection to Route 58 from the airbase. Right?
Correct. Okay, so all the access would have to dump out to Route 58?
Route 18 or out towards Rockland. The existing parkways, Trotter Road, the existing entrances, I don't know how else I can describe it.
Right. It looks like it's all landlocked, and the only way would be to Route 58 or to a couple of the side streets.
No, to get to the Abington land, I understand. The entrance to the airbase is on Route 18 or over near Route 212.
On Route 18, so
correct.
they'd have to be going through the airbase and out to Route 18.
They would come. You would enter Route 18, and then they, as part of the development, would develop and build new roadways to extend the development into Rockland or Abington, but there would not be a roadway coming all the way out to Route 58, is what I understand.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
confused, thank you.
Moderator recognizes Mr. Haggerty.
Alex Haggerty, 515 Summer Street, and in accordance with the Board of Selectmen handbook, I am speaking as an individual, not for the board. I just want to touch base on, because it's been talked about open space and conservation of the SRA land. Previous developers had not considered open space or conservation in their plan. Brookfield and New England developers are. For me in particular, preserving conservation and open space and natural habitats in Abington are important. And that's why I'm in favor of Articles 2, 3, and 4, because this does that. This preserves open space and conservation land. We are putting 80 acres into open space in Abington's portion of the SRA. So that is extremely, extremely important. The second thing is, it was talked about, why aren't we seeing, what buildings are going in there? And one thing that I expressed appreciation to the SRA, or specifically the developers, because as we all know in Abington, we are all promised from previous developers what you're going to put here. You're going to put a stadium, you're going to put a movie theater, you're going to put a Dave & Buster's. Those developers never had the authority to say that, because they did not know what was going to go in there, because they didn't have the water, they didn't have the sewage, they didn't have the plans in place. They weren't prepared. So for the SRA today, it would be intellectually dishonest to say what specific businesses or residentials we're going to be putting there on, this portion of our Abington's piece or that portion of Abington's piece. So, but their commitment of 79% commercial or 25%, 75% commercial and 25% residential, and then vice versa, different plans. That's the plan. Those are the plans moving forward. And lastly, I just encourage, please join this. Please join your fellow your elected Board of Selectmen in supporting Articles 2, 3, and 4. I fear that if we don't do this now, we're never going to do this. And Mr. Moderator, I will make a motion to move this question.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. However, by procedure, because Alex expressed his opinion and then moved the question, which would cut off debate from others, I can't allow that motion. If anyone wants to make a motion to debate, that's the first thing you're going to tell me at the microphone. So I'm going to look to Mr. Collins, and then, depending on what he has to say, I will go to the next speaker, and if neither one of you moves the question, I'm going to move the question. Mr. Collins.
Rick Collins, 74 Orange Street. I'm a member of the Planning Board. And during our meeting with the Master Development Team, Tom Dion brought up something in the 99 pages of bylaw regulations regarding prohibited uses. And it was described at the time that there was a list of prohibited uses, but that they could be allowed if it went through a special permitting process. We brought that up to the development team. The development team insisted that was an error, that it was, I think it was a rote error that could be fixed. Is that the correct terminology? But I just wanted to make sure that that is the case, that the language that we had discussed at the meeting is not going to be presented moving forward, that it can be corrected via a change some other way.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm going to, moderator, recognize Mr. Tim Sullivan, Attorney Tim Sullivan from the Air Base.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So the reference was a question about whether you could get a special permit for hazardous materials.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an error, it was being read incorrectly. So in the MUD district, for example, there's a carve out for household quantities. So like if a retail store has household quantities of, window cleaner, or a residential project has like pool cleaner or something like that, there's a carve out for that. So it would be prohibited by the Water Resource Protection District, but it's carved back if you get a special permit from the SRA and they approve it. So it was just a clarification. No words were needed. It was being read incorrectly, and we talked about it afterwards.
Okay. Just want to make sure that our council agrees with that we're not opening up our the land to be used for hazardous waste storage, for oil storage, for transfer facilities, for anything else that would be a prohibited use.
Moderator recognizes Town Council Greg Corbo.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Moderator. Obviously, I have to defer to the developers who wrote the proposal, but in answer to your original question, whatever language you're voting on today is the language, and that language cannot be changed unless it's at a subsequent town meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Corbo. Yes, ma'am, please state your name and address.
Good morning, Mr. Moderator. Christine Smith, 99 Dorsey Street. I request to move the question.
Thank you.
Can I speak? I just have a point of clarification.
Mr. Breelman.
A point of clarification.
I'm sorry, I have to take them, it's procedurally.
But that was
Mr.
misinformation
Breelman.
that we were just given.
Mr. Breelman, your point has been taken. The motion has been made to move the question. We'll take a vote on whether to move the question. If you vote aye, we will end debate, and then we'll take a second vote on whether to approve or reject the articles. So all those in favor of moving the question, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Nay. The ayes have it. We'll move the question. We will now take up the vote on whether to approve Articles 2, 3, and 4. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to take one vote whether to approve the articles together or not. It does require a 2/3 vote to approve. Anything less than 2/3 would be a denial. Any questions procedurally? If not, all those in favor of the Planning Board's motion to approve Articles 2, 3, and 4 as presented in the warrant, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Moderator declares more than 2/3 of vote. Articles 2, 3, and 4 have passed. At this time, I want to invite our guests. You need 7 people have to stand and question the vote. If we have 7 people, we can have a counted question, but I can tell you, in my opinion, it was well over the 2/3 requirement. I'm going to invite our guests to leave. You're more than invited to stay if you'd like to. If you could flick to the next slide while they're leaving, I just did 2 community public service announcements. A lot of stuff going on this weekend that the Abington Celebrates crowd wanted to let us know. It's happening right now, tonight at Island Grove, tomorrow. They do a great job for our town in celebrating the heritage and the community of our little town of Abington. And then tomorrow, the next slide tells you a little bit about the Boosters door-to-door drive. Expect to see student athletes knocking on your doors between 11 and 1 tomorrow. Okay. We will move on to our last and final article, Article 5. Article 5 regards the funding of the fire station and DPW building project. The moderator recognizes Chairman of the Finance Committee, Dan Eddy.
The Finance Committee moves that the town appropriate the sum of $38.5 million for the financing of the demolition of the existing DPW buildings and the final design, construction, and original furnishing and equipping of a new fire station and new DPW buildings and anything incidental or related thereto on the parcel of land located on Map 31, Lot 79A, and Map 31, Lot 79 of the Assessor's Maps of the Town of Abington, more specifically defined as 225 Central Street and 215 Central Street in said town, and a parcel of land located on Map 32, Lot 1 of the Assessor's Map of the Town of Abington, more specifically defined as 199 Central Street, said parcel authorized to be taken by eminent domain in Article 10 of the 2023 Annual Town Meeting. And to authorize the Board of Selectmen to accept on behalf of the town any federal or state financial assistance available to offset the funds appropriated pursuant to this vote, to authorize the town manager to enter into agreements and to take all actions necessary to effectuate the purposes of this vote, and to authorize the town manager with the advice of a building committee of 5 members to be appointed by the town manager to carry out the respective projects. And to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum pursuant to the provisions of Massachusetts Law, Chapter 44, Section 7, as amended, or any other enabling authority, provided, however, that this vote shall not take effect until the town votes to exempt from the limitations on total taxes imposed by MGL Chapter 59, Section 21C, Proposition 2.5, so-called, the amounts required to pay the principal of and interest on the borrowing authorized by this vote.
Just for correction and confirmation, it's Chapter 59, Section 21CM, as written in the warrant. Thank you, Mr. Eddy. I should have warned you, he's required to read that entire warrant that entire motion out loud. Bond counsel satisfied with that? We're good to go. Okay, thank you, Mr. Eddy. The motion is on the table. What I'd like to do, similar to the previous one, is have a brief presentation from the chairman of the committee that helped put this together, Mr. Derek Hamadi, and then we will have a couple of people I'm going to recognize right after him, and then we'll open up the floor. So, Mr. Hamadi, have at it.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here. My name is Derek Hamadi. I live at 151 Cynthia Road in Abington. I served as the former chairman of the Fire Station DPW Building Committee, and also serve as one of your firefighter paramedics here in the town. So I have a brief presentation to give you guys. I've been here several times before. This has been a 4-year project that we started a long time ago, and over the beginning, the first 2 years of this project, we were solely focused on just working on a fire station. But over those years, those first couple of years, we couldn't find any appropriate sized land to fit the fire station. And department heads got together with town management, and we realized that there were other departments in the town that needed immediate addressing that had to be taken care of. So the decision was made to combine the fire station and the DPW facilities together to try to put together a combined package that we could present to you to fix 2 problems in one set motion. So the presentation that I want to start off with is showing you what we currently have. Right now, we have 2 fire stations. Everybody here, I'm sure, is familiar with them. They're very old buildings that have been in service for quite some time, and they've simply outgrown their use. The DPW is even an older building that is in critical shape that absolutely needs to be replaced. So right now, with what we have here, we're trying to find a way to present to you guys a complete package that would put together a new fire station to replace the 2 existing stations and replace the DPW with a brand new facility. The next slide that we're going to have is going to show some of the inside conditions. Over the years, I've presented this at many board meetings, at many town meetings, and a lot of people have come down to the station to see tours. But as you can see, the size of the buildings when they were constructed, they just weren't built for modern day apparatus. We've simply just outgrown the buildings. We can barely fit the trucks that we have in there as it is, and it just needs to be taken care of. We've been maintaining these buildings as best as we can, but ultimately they're just getting old and we're outgrowing them. The next slide is going to show some of the DPW facilities. They're in even worse shape. They have large apparatus, and they have to park them all inside one garage. And their facilities are actually in critical shape. The main apparatus garage that they have can't withstand even inclement weather. When it rains, it rains inside there. And that's our property. That's the town's DPW apparatus that's in there. That's our property to take care of and protect. And right now, it's just getting rained on. So we needed to upgrade this facility to make sure that all that apparatus is taken care of. Also, our salt sheds are in failure. One of them is currently collapsing, which probably won't make it much farther. I'd be surprised if it makes it another winter. Also, there are large apparatus that they keep that also needs to be stored. The goal is to really give them a place to park everything that they need inside someplace to keep them safe, keep them taken care of, and then also replace the salt sheds that are collapsing. The next slide is going to kind of talk about the finances. This has been a big conversation over the past couple of years. So to go back in time, 4 years ago when the fire station first came together, we met with the architects, a developer, we came up with a program, and the original fire station itself was almost a $40 million building. The former chief, John Nuttall, and myself sat down and we went through that program with the architects, and we cut out quite a bit. We got that down to about a $30 million building. And then as time went on and we got into an agreement with the DPW, we took some of the original money, that $3.5 million that we asked for a few years ago, and we used that to do a feasibility study for the DPW, and we got all the information that they needed, and they put together a program. When we originally got that final put together, the total project was upwards of almost $70 million. And we knew that that was just too much. It's too much money to try to ask for, to try to rebuild these. So we went back to the cutting board, and we shaved down, and we made the adjustments that we had to make. That way we could try to present something that was palpable for the residents in town. I mean, at the end of the day, this is going to affect every one of us. And we understand that. So we're trying to do our best with what we have. So at the end, the DPW and the fire department and the committee all together came up with a recommendation for a project that was $58 million. We submitted that to the town, and the town ultimately made the decision that that was just still a little too much. So a stakeholders meeting was held, and we made some more additional cuts, and we were able to drop it down to a $38.5 million project. Now, we made sure that this project was going to be feasible for both departments to maintain buildings that were going to last 50 to 75 years. That was the goal at the very beginning of this, is to build something that's going to survive, not build something that we're going to have to come back and ask for more money later. We wanted to get this project done right the first time. So we tightened up the belts, we made the cuts that we had to make, and ultimately now we're at a $38.5 million ask to build this fire station and DPW. We have the space to do it, we have the means to do it, and now we just need the funding to do it. This shows the tax breakdown, just to go back on that slide if you don't mind. These are the estimates of what we're going to be looking at. This shows two different tax rates. We're hoping and expecting to get the 3% tax rate, but in a worst case scenario, if the funding doesn't get appropriated or bonded correctly, and we're looking at the 5%, we wanted to make sure that we have full transparency to show you exactly what this is going to affect you guys. Now, the tax calculator on the website, investinabington.com, you could put in your exact evaluation of your home, and it'll give you a better idea of what you're looking at, but that, I believe, is at the 3% rate. This is going to kind of show you the differences between the 3 and the 5%. It's a little bit more, but it's not much, but ultimately this is the annual breakdown, which still gets broken down into quarterly. So the plan going forward on the next slide that we started to show is the site plan. This is where 215, 225 Central Street currently are. And the next slide is going to show you the current buildings that are there. So there's an existing police department, existing DPW maintenance building, and existing police storage. Those three buildings are going to stay where they are. They're not going to go anywhere. We're just going to, they're newer buildings. They're in great shape. They're able to stick around where they are. But going forward, the proposed areas that we're going to be looking for is putting the proposed new DPW building in the back right-hand side of the facility, of the lot. This new salt shed is going to be on the left-hand side, the top left, and the new proposed fire station on the bottom left. So altogether, this is going to show that we can fit the new buildings on there. We have a new access road that's going to be going on that new property that we acquired at the last town meeting. That's going to give access to the DPW to get up to their property and be able to function on their own and not clutter up any of the stuff in the middle, so it's not going to deter from any of the police department's access of going in and out, and then the fire department will have their own drive-through bays. A couple questions that came up that I wanted to address were, if we go into these if we combine the two fire stations and we move into this new facility, what's going to happen with the existing two fire stations? And at the Board of Selectmen meeting several meetings ago, it was decided that those two buildings would be sold. So just to be clear, those buildings are intended to be sold. We're not going to hold on to them. Sorry about that. Those two buildings, the existing fire stations, would be sold. So there's not going to be a reason to hold on to them. If this project moves forward, once we evacuate those buildings and move into a new building, if this gets passed, we'll be selling those properties. A couple other questions that got brought up before I got up to speak have to do with the actual layouts of the two new buildings. So if you wouldn't mind throwing up the layouts. The floor plans for the two stations. So that right there is the DPW. There it is. So the DPW is going to be composed of 13,500 square feet. Now, this is going to be to combine everything that they currently have into one fixed facility that's going to be in the back right-hand side of that lot. Now, this is just a conceptual design, because when we made the drop from 58 million to 38 million, we had to make some quick adjustments, and the ultimate was to get something to show you guys where it's going to give them everything that they have, plus approximately 3,000 more square feet than they currently have now. This layout might not be the exact same when we're done, but that's going to be developed once we get to the next step. We still have some funding remaining from our 3.5 million that's going to close out what we started to get us to construction documents, and then we'll be able to go out to bid. But ultimately, the 13,500 square feet is where they're going to be, and we're going to be able to manipulate and what they call value engineer the rooms to fit inside this facility. For the fire department, This would be the first floor of the fire department. This is going to be combining the two stations that we currently have. So altogether, what we're trying to do with this is to make sure that we have enough room to fit all the apparatus that we currently have with all the staffing that we currently have, and to make sure that we have room for growth as things get bigger. The town's going to get bigger, the fire department might be getting bigger, the DPW might be getting bigger, so we need to plan for that. We don't want to build something now that in 5 or 10 years we come back and say, hey, we're too small, we need to get a little bigger. We want to solve that problem now. So we're able to get all that done inside these layouts, and again, this is all conceptual. Any of this could change, but a lot of the questions that were brought up were how are we going to be able to fit some of the apparatus in there, because we still have 5 bays, because right now, headquarters station at 1040 Bedford Street has 3 bays, and our 5 Rockland Street, Station 2 has 2 bays. So we're still staying at 5 bays. How are we making this any bigger? Well, how we're making it bigger is that all of this is essentially two sets of bays in one. They're drive-through bays. They are much larger. They have enough space that we can get around them and do maintenance on them and be able to manipulate ourselves through them, because right now, to get it from one side of the building to the other, you have to essentially walk around the perimeter of the building. These new fire stations are going to be designed with drive-through bays, so that, to answer some of the questions that I received, were how is 5 bays getting us any bigger? It's because it's doubling the size of the apparatus bay. And 2 of the bays that we currently have are only single vehicle bays, so we really don't have 5 full-size bays. This still houses all the administrative offices that we have, and for anybody that's ever come to take a tour or have seen any of my previous presentations, a lot of the offices that we have are multi-use offices. So one office could house 3 to 4 different people in it. One office is actually in our boiler room. We've done the best to manage what we have for the space. And I can't really speak for the DPW, but I did do a tour of their building, and they're just as congested. The second floor of the building is going to house the staff. This was one of the big questions that I've been asked, is why separate bunking areas? Well, we work in this building 24/7, 365. We don't do 9 to 5s. We're here all day. But the thing that's changed since these buildings were built back in the 60s and 70s is now we have female firefighters. That's never been a thing before in the past for fire service. It's the way the world's going. We're happy that we have them. They're amazing, but we need to have privacy for everybody at the station. It's just the right thing to do. We also are limited by bathrooms. We only have 2 bathrooms, one at each station, so there is no privacy. There's no privacy in showers. There's no privacy in their bunks. So going back hundreds of years ago when firefighters were here in Abington, it was just men in a single bunk room doing their job. I don't even know if the horses that were pulling the steamers back then were female horses. They might have just been male horses too. But we need to have some separation. This gives us enough room to do that. This also gives us enough room to house everybody individually during storm coverages when we double our staff, which is something that does happen quite frequently. And then it's also there for growth. If we end up hiring more people down the line because the town is growing, we'll have room to grow into. And I hope that kind of answers anybody's questions on that. So overall, this has been a long process. We've done everything we could to try to get this as cost-effective as possible. It's never really going to get any cheaper than this, folks. It really isn't. And if we wait any longer, it's just going to end up costing us more money down the line. So we really hope that you guys will vote in favor of this. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Hamadi. Before we take questions, I'd like to recognize three gentlemen for their comments. The Board of Selectmen Chairman Alex Haggerty, DPW Director John Stone, and Fire Chief Jack Glynn in that order. So, Mr. Haggerty, if you'd like to go first.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, Abington residents. As Chairman of the Abington Board of Selectmen, I am proud to report the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously on September 11, 2023, recommending favorable action on special town meeting warrant Article 5, funding of fire station and DPW building project. Abington's firefighters and DPW workers need modernized facilities with the compatible tools they need to help keep our community and your families safe. Article 5 will centralize public safety operations of Abington Fire, DPW, with police. DPW will be equipped with new apparatus storage facility to house DPW vehicles and new salt shed. As a town, we have the opportunity to send a clear message that we support our firefighters and DPW workers with a new facility to improve public safety, proper storage apparatus, and working conditions. The town's approval of the fire station and DPW building project is an essential investment in Abington's future. As chairman of the Board of Selectmen, I humbly ask you to please join your elected Board of Selectmen in voting to approve Article 5, funding of fire station and DPW building project. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Moderator recognizes DPW Director John Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Would it be possible to get the floor plan of the DPW on the slide?
Sure.
On the screen, please. Thank you. Our current facility on Central Street was built in 1942 and is now beyond repair. As Derek alluded to, the building leaks, the roof leaks. We can barely house anything in it anymore. And due to the poor working conditions of the DPW employees, I support this project displayed on the screen, or a plan that has similar dimensions and square footage. As Derek also alluded to, we have cut back. There's been several cutbacks throughout the process, and this is the end result here. And as a DPW, we do support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Moderator recognizes Fire Chief Jack Glynn.
Thank you. I don't want to overstep too much on everything Derek said so eloquently, but basically just to retrace back, we're operating in a fire station right now with central headquarters where if we have a half-inch of snow, we rely on a DPW to make sure they go by and scoop it up quick, and we're out there shoveling up tire tracks to get our $1.2 million tower truck in the station that clears by a half an inch. This is what we do. Our facilities, the same place we have lunch, 3 feet away we have an exhaust pipe from one of the trucks. We also meet there. We also have people from the public there. As Derek alluded to, times have changed with the fire service, and we're happy that's the case. What we're doing with this project is not for the next 10 or 20 years. This is for the next 50 to 75 years. This project started 4 years ago. Members of our department went and we decided we'd get together, a large group. We toured all the area fire departments in Massachusetts that had recently been built. We really took an interest in it, probably a dozen, I'm guessing. We asked them, what are the things that you would do differently? What are the things you wish you did? How can we make it better if we go forward with it? What are the things to look for in that avenue? There was so much thought put into this right from the very beginning, and we understand it. I'm a taxpayer as well, and we understand the cost, so we wanted to be efficient with this. Going forward, we looked at what we needed and went over different plans with it. We looked into everything possible. Again, Derek kind of encapsulated a little more than I need to at this point now, but I guess the best way of looking at it is this isn't something for the next 10 to 20 years, folks. This is generational. This is something for the next 50 to 75 years. It's never going to get better than this price-wise. The efficiency that this has been done with is phenomenal. The teamwork that this has been done with is phenomenal. I can't recommend this project going forward anymore. This is a win for the town of Abington. It's not necessarily about the firefighters, the DPW. As a whole, for the town, this is a huge win. So I would absolutely recommend and ask your support on this going forward.
Thank you, Chief Glynn. If you'd like to ask a question or make any comments, I'm going to ask you to be as efficient as possible. We'll try to get as many comments on the record as we can. I know everyone is spending their Saturday, and I'm really appreciative that everyone is here, but we would like to have a healthy debate and discussion about this article before taking a vote. So we'll start right off here with name and address.
Catherine Salem, 22 Lanchard Lane. I'm actually in favor of the project. My only question is, in past town meetings, there have always been issues raised of the need for 2 fire stations because of access to the areas of the town. And I just want to make sure that the fire department is comfortable with one central location and not having 2 facilities to be able to get to both ends of the town.
Thank you. Moderator recognizes Mr. Hamadi.
Hi, that's a great question. So over the years, there's been, prior to my time on the fire department, I've been here 11 years. When I first got on, we were running 2 stations, but we were also running 5-man shifts. And prior to that, we were running 4-man shifts. So spreading out the wealth of manpower across the town made a lot more sense then. Now we're running 6-man shifts, and to be honest, because we still cross-staff our ambulances and our tower truck, It's kind of a little more efficient for us to be able to have everybody all in one same place, because then we can make a better decision on who's going to take what piece to what call. Because if we have our primary ambulance, which is housed at a 5 Rockland Street, is out on a call, and a fire call comes in the south side of town, that fire truck that's down there is currently not staffed. We have to call back to come in to try to fix that problem. Now, luckily enough, about 50% of the department does live in town. So we have a great ability to come back in and cover things, so we've never really been too concerned about it. But being able to house everybody at one place would be a more operational benefit to us. The other thing that we got to look at is Abington is approximately 9 square miles. It's not really the best cut up wise for roadways, but we manage pretty well. One of the biggest hazards that we've ever had that we always have to kind of think about prior to us starting to drive out of a building is how do we beat the train? Because we're both on one side of the train. So if anything is on the eastern side of town, we always have to think about what time of day is it? Is the train, are the trains going to be down? So whenever everybody's in a current station and everybody's in-house, nobody's outside, and we know we have to get to the eastern side of town, somebody has to think ahead and go. Somebody has to go down Central Street, because then we don't have to worry about the train. Being housed on Central Street means that would never be a problem. We could get any truck to any part of town without ever having to say over the radio, we're delayed by the train. So, I mean, that's really one of the biggest factors to this.
Thank you, Mr. Hamadi. Yes, ma'am. State name and address.
Christine Quayle, 264 Wales Street. I have 3 questions, and you can answer them when I'm through with the questions. 1, are there plans in this new fire station for a decontamination unit? 2, in the event of a town-wide catastrophic emergency, is there room in the projected fire station for civil defense meetings? And 3, to what extent have the proponents of a new fire station worked with NFPA? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamadi.
Those are great questions. All right, so decontamination. For those that have ever come to the stations and taken a tour, our headquarters station currently has a single sop sink that's next to our ice machine that is wedged between a washer and dryer and about 1.5 foot clearance to our backup engine. That's what we currently have for a decon station at our headquarters station. The new proposed decon room, and it's on one of the flyers that we did have sent out, and we put it up on a few of the web pages over the years. A new up-to-date modern decon room doesn't have to be gigantic, but it has to have the space to actually put things up and actually decontaminate. And it's not just decontamination of the stuff that we use. I don't want to get graphic, but the things that we use that are on calls, that needs to get cleaned up, and that's our responsibility to do before we put it back in service. But it's also the decontamination of the stuff that we wear. All of our gear, whenever we go to a fire, gets contaminated with all sorts of things, and 99% of those things are cancer-causing. The biggest part of the new fire station, the heart of the building, has what's called a hot to cold corridor. It's where you can't go from the dirty part of the building to the clean part of the building without getting everything decontaminated prior to moving. So that's one of the biggest factors. As far as NFPA goes, NFPA throws a lot of great recommendations out there, and I'd love to say that we're maxing those out. NFPA requires or recommends 4 people per apparatus. We get 2. That's just because of staffing, that's where we're at. But we do our best to maintain and follow any of the recommendations that NFPA comes out with, and I think we're doing a pretty good job of it, minus the staffing.
And Mr. Hamadi or Chief Glynn, the third part of the question was civil defense in case of a townwide calamity.
So the training room that we have in there can be multiple different things. It's going to be a modern training room, but it can also back up as an EOC, which is something that can be used for any sort of major disaster.
EOC is Emergency Operations Center.
Command, yeah, or some center. So that would be used to be able to house any sort of state or federal agencies that need to come in if there was anything catastrophic. It's also going to be used for a boatload of other things as far as training, community training. It could be used as cooling stations if we ever needed to. There's a lot of things that it could be used for. It's a good space. It was one of the things that we had to cut back on. Originally it was a little bit larger, but we knew that we had to make some constraints, so we had to cut that back, but it's still more than adequate to help us out if we ever need anything.
Thank you, Mr. Hamadi. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Kraft.
Martha Kraft, 175 Damon Road. I have 2 questions. The first one is, I want to make sure I heard this correctly. $38.5 million bond over 30 years. Are we getting any grants or other money? Because I actually think that's a pretty good price.
So we're not. I wish I could say we were. It's not for a lack of trying.
Oh, okay.
We're going to keep trying too. It's not that this is all said and done. If anything comes up that we can get, we will try, but we have tried everything. Our wonderful state representative,
Federal?
Allison Sullivan, has been doing a great job for us she's been checking in at the State House and even up to the federal level for us. If there's anything that is out there, we're going to try for it, absolutely.
Okay. On the sale of the other 2 stations, will that money go towards paying off some of the bond? Or are we going to spend that on a party?
Moderator will recognize Town Manager Scott Lambiase.
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
The question is, when the existing fire stations are sold, will that money be used to
pay the actual
offset
bond
the
expense?
bond?
I really can't say at this point. I would say no. It would probably go into the general fund, and then eventually it will go to pay for capital or other projects that we have to do. So it will,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
It'll come to town meeting, in other words.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Future town meeting would have to approve any expenditure of any money that comes into the town.
Okay. All right. And just I want to say that I am the daughter of a fireman, although I'm the old daughter of a fireman. But I think we do need a new fire station. And I think the location is really perfect because you've got access to north, south, and east and west where you're planning to put it.
Thank you very much. Anything else to be heard on Article 5? Yes, sir. Approaching the microphone. Please state your name and address.
David Lawrence, 98 Helen Drive. Question I had was on the fire station, maintenance on the vehicles. And since you get fire station, you get the DPW, and you get the police department all in the same area. Are they all going to have separate mechanics, or is it all going to be tied in under one roof for doing maintenance on stuff?
Mr. Hamadi, hold on one sec. Matt, could you go back to the site plan? It might help with this answer.
Thank you.
Here you go, Mr. Hamadi. Oh, backwards.
All right. So that's a really good question. So currently, the existing maintenance building, that rectangle building in the middle, that houses the DPW's maintenance. They take care of all the vehicles in town. So it actually works out better for all of us to be located in the same area. The main mechanic that works on everything that we have, the DPW is in charge of maintaining all of our equipment for the most part when it comes to mechanical. And that includes the police department as well. So everything will be right in the same area to be worked on. Now, as the fire department, we do have an internal mechanic that handles some of the small ancillary things, but ultimately, we still have to send every apparatus to that maintenance building for regular PMs or maintenance, periodically maintenance, as well as anytime that there's any faulty issues that come up with them. We ultimately have to get the vehicles to that maintenance building. So being on the same location is actually going to be a benefit to not just us, but the whole town.
Thank you, Mr. Amati. Go ahead.
The next question I have for you, how much money did they get from the state when they widened Route 18 that you guys lost property on Route 18 fire station? And is any of that money going towards this?
How much money did the town receive from the state when they widened Route 18 in
Right.
front of the Route 18 fire station?
Right.
I don't. Was there a taking?
Probably wasn't a lot.
Yeah. No. I don't even know if there was a taking. The edge of pavement isn't necessarily the edge of where the state owned.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And also, $38 million is a lot of money for the buildings. Now, how much of that is for the outside of the building and how much of it is for the inside? Because you can build something on the outside that's a steel frame, or you can do brick. We all know what's a hell of a lot more expensive. Yes, it would look nicer in brick, but functionally, it would do the same thing if you put a steel building up.
So, yes, you're right, absolutely. But for the most part, the buildings aren't all brick all the way around. I believe the front of the fire station is actually just a facade, brick facade. But the reason that the insides of the building are so expensive is because all the technology is all modern. The stuff that's on the inside is where the big money is. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Please state your name and address.
My name is Richard Mullen. I live at 707 Plymouth Street. I don't have a question. I have observations. Let me preface by saying that this is a necessary project. I fully support the need to train emergency personnel properly, equip them properly, lead them properly, and house them properly. I know this after a long career, having retired as a Coast Guard officer who spent most of my career dealing with emergency response situations. However, I want to draw your attention to this building. In 2015, the town of Abington approved the construction of a new high school. And the cost of that project, the original contract price, was $78.91 million. Looking around this high school, since my grandson will be coming here next year for the first time as a middle school student, I'm very impressed. This is a really good piece of work. Well done, Abington. You did a good job. But keep in mind, in 2015, when this facility was funded at $78.91 million, it was completed in 2017 and started occupancy then. If you take the rate of inflation from 2015 until today, that's 29.54%. The cost of building that same school today would be $102.22 million. The footage of this building is 235,370 square feet. In 2023 dollars, that's $434.29 per square foot. The cost of this project, and I have generously included the vehicle wash bay addition square footage, even though it has zero funding on this document. The total square footage of this project is 46,500 square feet. The cost projected is a little over $38.5 million, which brings us to $831.71 per square foot. That's a delta of 92.7% above what this building cost. Now, in my second career, I did a lot of contracting with the federal government and private entities on ship repairs and constructions. And I'm here to tell you that if I had gone into a bidding conference with my competitors for a similar project and said, well, I want your work, but I'm going to be 92% more expensive than my competitors. If I had not been laughed out of the conference, I would have been told to go back to school and sharpen your pencil.
So
my wife and I live here on a fixed income at the largest of the federal government, military retirement and Social Security. Since moving here in 2011, the taxes in this town have increased significantly, and it's difficult for us to keep up. Certainly over the period that I'm talking about, we have not had increases in our income of 29%. So I encourage you to look at this project as necessary, a good project, a logical project, centralized location, scales of efficiency are great, but at what cost? Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service with the Coast Guard. Yes, sir. Could you please state your name again, once again?
Rich Negrelli, 340 Diane.
Right up to the microphone, Mr. Negrelli.
All right, right over here.
Thank you.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Rich Negrelli, 340 Diane Circle. Is there a dispatch going to be put into this new project?
So we will have a dispatch room inside this building.
Okay.
Now, it's not just a requirement, but it's ultimately a backup.
Yeah.
Because we do use Holbrook Regional as our dispatch
Right.
center, but God forbid there was ever a catastrophic reason that something went down, to go back to having a major catastrophe area of being able to run, this building is self-sustaining.
And a generator is in the project too?
Oh, yes, everything's going to have, yep, it'll totally be backed up.
I know it's going to cost a lot. It needs to be done. It's something that's helping out 2 departments, not just one. So you guys have been great. Every time I call, you're there for me.
Thank you.
It's an important thing to have housing for the fire department and, of course, the public works.
Absolutely.
Full support.
Thank you, Mr. Negrelli. Mrs. Franny.
12 Platt Street, Mary Jo Fernie. I just want to say thank you. First of all, we started off with, what, 48 million, and we've cut that way down, including with the highway, DPW. I live on a pension-type program also in the town, and my pension don't go up, but I'm willing to go forward. I support you guys 100%, and thank you.
Thank you
Thank you, Mrs. Franny. I'm going to recognize this gentleman.
Pete Walters, 157 Green Street. Move the question.
You have a question? Mr. Donovan has a procedural question. I'm going to hold on to that in 1 second.
I just want to make it abundantly clear, the vote, this is a two-part process. The vote today, if it's in the affirmative, then has to be approved next Saturday on the ballot. It's a debt exclusion, it's not an override. A debt exclusion is a one-time exemption to pay for this, but it can't go into effect unless and until it's an affirmative vote at town meeting and an affirmative vote on the ballot. So if you vote in favor of it today, you have to remember, if you haven't already voted, to go down to the Beaverbrook School on a week from today on Saturday and also vote, because unless that vote is in the affirmative, then this is all for naught. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Donovan. I'm going to hold on the motion to move the question at this time. I want to make sure that people are comfortable. This lady, I'm going to give you one more attempt, and if there's anyone else has final words without being repetitive, I'll consider it, but let's move forward.
Okay, just a really quick clarification. The 38.5 million, that covers all of the buildings involved in building this station, because it's not just one building. There's
Correct.
Yes, it
okay,
covers
so it's all of
everything.
it. And is there early voting next week?
It already started.
It's existing right now. You can go to the town clerk's office during business hours,
During the week?
982-2112.
Thank you.
Anything else to be heard on Article 5? If not, we'll move to a vote. Just want to make sure everyone's comfortable and everyone understands. Okay, so again, this will require a 2/3 vote to pass it here at town meeting. As Mr. Donovan just instructed, and there will be a slide after the end of this town meeting, the polls would be open next Saturday at the Beaverbrook School in the gymnasium from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. If it's successful here, it has to be successful there. It needs a 2/3 vote at town meeting and a majority vote at the ballot box. Everyone cool with that? If there's no questions, we're going to take one vote for Article 5. All those in favor of approving Article 5 and the motion presented, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. It is, Article 5 passes. It's not unanimous, but it's well more than 2/3. Thank you very much. I want to thank everyone for attending our town meeting. I need to say thank you to the ushers who helped us out, Matt Lyons, who ran the PowerPoint. Thank you, Matt. To our town clerk, Leanne, and Rebecca, you did a wonderful job. Jamie Hoy, our custodian, was a godsend, and Kevin Tachi and his entire crew from Cable TV. I greatly appreciate it. Please drive carefully as you leave today. There is some youth soccer out front of the building. There are some high school kids in the fitness center. Please drive slowly as you leave the school campus. I'd like to call this town meeting adjourned as of 11:06 a.m.